Welcome to the Ian Bousfield Experience. I'm glad you're here. This series of podcasts are just things that come up in my mind when I'm thinking about playing, when I'm thinking about teaching, and general thoughts about music. There are some things here that I hope you'll find really useful. And don't forget, if you've got any comments or if there's anything you want to discuss further, go to ianbousfield.com. Okay, so I have some questions here from my really good friend, Sean Roish, in California. Not just a good friend, but one of my heroes of pedagogy. Does the really, really important work with students, a lot of them under the age of 18, and does a fantastic job with them. Sean has asked, balancing life with work. He says, this is something that I constantly am working on. Yeah. Good luck. When you find the answer, let me know. I'm probably not the best person to ask about this. You know, the problem is our life is our work as musicians. It's a problem that I run into quite a lot. I've landed myself in hospital a couple of times in the last 5 years because I've actually enjoyed myself into ill health. I once had a discussion with a doctor in Austria 10, 15 years ago. And, you know, the word stress came up. And he said, I've never seen anybody who loves their work more than you do. So I would doubt that you're ever going to suffer from overwork. I have done it, and it has affected my health because I've loved everything that I've done. I don't think there's anything that I do in my life that I don't think, fantastic, I'm going to go and do this, that, or the other, because my life is so varied. But yeah, I do have a wonderful wife and family, and the trombone is my job, my life, and my hobby. So it is incredibly difficult to get a balance. I know a friend who works on a 10-10-10 system in every month. 10 days at home with his family, 10 days teaching, and 10 days playing solos. And that works for him. He plans his life out ahead and does it that way. I think there is no real answer to this, Sean, because whatever is a good balance for some people is not for others. I mean, goodness me, conductors. I remember Zubin Mehta once telling me sometimes he spent 2 weeks in a year at home in Los Angeles, in that wonderful house he's got up on the hill. And that worked for him. He loved it. You know, that would drive the rest of us crazy, I don't doubt. My particular background is I've gone away from home that much over the years that if I'm at home for 2 weeks, I start getting twitchy. You know, it doesn't feel right. You know, I feel like I should be getting my passport out. I think, yeah, the answer is individual because the balance is this. It's spending time with the nucleus of your life, with the people who are the most important to you and nourishing that, because from that, everything grows. And like everything else that I tell you on these podcasts, I haven't always got that right myself. But if the nucleus is not okay, if the power bank, your relationships are not okay, nothing else will be okay. So that's the first thing, is to look at your schedule and plan out, not like putting appointments in a diary, but actually to work out when are we going to be together as a couple or as a family, what are we going to do, what is going to nourish that best, what do you need, what do I need. And I think this is something that I can say with the benefit of age and experience, because when I was in my 20s, you know, I'll put it quite frankly, my wife knew that she came second. And I have apologized to her for that. You know, I was just totally ambitious and driven. And driven to be the best me I could possibly be as a trombonist. But, you know, as also I've said in these other podcasts, you know, being the best you all round as a human being is important. And I think we forget that. And part of it is nourishing the grounding elements in life. It's cooking a meal for the kids. It's washing the floor. It's using the washing machine occasionally. Taking the kids to school. I love it. When I'm just dad, when I'm home, just being dad, I absolutely love it. We have such a wonderful time. And I probably enjoy that as much as anything else. But we need to be artistically nourished as well. We're artists, we're communicators, we're also athletes, we're performers. And finding the right balance, particularly in this, what they call in the UK, the gig economy, the freelance element. There are certain, if it reassures any freelancers out there, yes, there are times when I fly from Nashville to St. Petersburg to London to Tokyo because I'm not big time enough to decide when I do the big concerts. If they come, they come. I wasn't home for Christmas 3 years ago. Left on the 24th, came back on the 29th. I can't choose. So sometimes it comes in a huge glut. It's just like work. And yes, you do get tired and you do get stressed. But you have to then plan the balance out. And I sit down and I discuss with my wife, look, this offer has come in. Should I take it? Look, and in that case, it was at Christmas. I said, look, we're going to miss Christmas. Now, fortunately, a little bit like sailors' families tending to marry into sailors' families because they're the only people who understand how it works. My father-in-law is a much more famous musician than I am, and he's a wonderful musician. And so he was not at home much when my wife was a kid. So I said, look, it's Christmas. And she said, well, how much? First of all, do you want to do it? And secondly, how much are they going to pay? I said, yes, I do, and this is what they're going to pay. And she said, fine, cancel Christmas. And she said, look, the kids are so young, they don't know it's Christmas. So we had Christmas. We had the Yorkshire Christmas. We had the mean Christmas. We had it in early January, and we got everything on sale. It was fantastic. And it was quite special. But we always discuss, how are things with the balance. I think the team element is really important. Also, the taking the time out to go for a walk, to go for a run, to get some fitness is really important. The work-life balance, there are so many other things that go in there. Are you spiritually nourished? Are you physically fit? Are you healthy? So as to actually saying how you find a certain balance is an individual thing, but I'll tell you what we do is we write down all of the different elements in our life, probably once a year, and write down which aspects of it we're happy with and which we're not. And I'll be very honest with you now. I mean, I've just had a bit of bad luck for the first time in my life where, quite coincidentally, a couple of really nice big projects got cancelled. So for me, I'm looking to play. I'm not playing as much as I'd like to at the moment. So you're never going to find the ideal balance if you have a mixture of things in your life. But I don't know whether that's any use. I don't know whether anyone finds that interesting or not, but that's the conundrum that I am constantly battling with as well, just as you are. Okay, another fantastic question from Sean. What kind of tools do you have your students use? Apps, breathing, recording, etc. Okay, again, confession time. I went through, I've been through a little bit of a change in my teaching over the last few years, in that I've stopped doing what people think I'm supposed to do, and I do what I do. I don't have a metronome. Couldn't put my hand on a tuning machine. I never had any breathing apparatuses. I should probably record myself more than I do. That would be something I should do. As far as apps are concerned, I once used one called Pitch Primer. P-I-T-C-H Primer. P-R-I-M-E-R. Pitch Primer. And that kind of graphically goes back over a phrase and says which notes are too high or too low. And I found that quite useful. And I am not sponsored by Pitch Primer. I don't even know whether it still exists. But if they'd like to send me some money, that would be absolutely fine. And that I found quite useful because it's non-negotiable. You know, you can see this note was too high, this note was too low, and you can set it to different settings of how it measures that. I don't like... I think metronomes are good to be used as a reference because we all need to know what the difference between 84 and 88 is, so at least we know that. And I probably don't use them as much as I should. What I don't like about all of these gadgets is people just use them as like a kind of a mantra. I mean, that bloody walking around with a strengthened balloon. I mean, come on, guys, you were born breathing. You know how to breathe. What I don't like about it is that all of these things, students always say to me, I can't think about two things at once. And, you know, he's like, I can't multitask. Sometimes I think if you ask people to think about a couple of things at once, they might actually fall over. But I understand it. I really do understand it. I don't like thinking about two things at once either. I only like thinking about one thing, and that's the music, and that's what I want to happen. Let's not even say the music. Let's just say, I want this to happen. And very often, whatever your body needs to do that, it will happen. Let's take, for example, a metronome. We all, as teachers, have experience of people who we just tell, you need to spend more time working with a metronome. And of course, there are different techniques as to how to use a metronome, and we'll go into that in other parts of a podcast. But, you know, musically, every note has its place to happen. And our job is to find that place. And you'll see where I'm going with this. You know, playing in time is not something separate from the music. It is the music. And I think the more we take people's attention away from what they want to do and put it on something else, like this thing clicking in the corner, which is a waste of time anyway, because it just, you know, abdicates your responsibility for playing in tempo. I don't think that helps. You know, tuning machines. Yeah, I should honestly use one more than I do. But as in my teaching room, no, I have nothing. I don't have anything. I have me, I have a pair of ears, and I have some smart kids, and they're all smart. So that's about it. And I'm, like I say, I'm successful enough to be, as a teacher, to be past the point of having to do what other people do or other people say. 4 of my students just won auditions in the last 8 weeks. So, and I mean for big jobs, for really big orchestras. So, no, it's about the music and putting the music into somebody's head or finding the music within that person and doing it that way. So honest answer to your question as to what kind of tools do I have my students use. What kind of students do I have my students use was your question. So I've answered what I have in my teaching room, and that's nothing. I like them to use a metronome as a reference, but not exclusively. And I like to use it with intermittent beats. So 1 beat every 2 measures, every 4 measures. I like them to check their general level of intonation with a tuning machine, but it's to check, it's not to work with. As for the breathing bags, nope. Also another good one from Sean. Can I describe my preparation for a world premiere solo with an orchestra? Something that I recently did with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra. And a wonderful experience it was too. All right, that's quite an interesting question. I haven't done as much of this as someone like Christian Lindberg, obviously. And I don't have that sort of time on my hands that someone like him or Håkan Hardenberger can dedicate to a world premiere. Interesting thing that Håkan Hardenberger said to me a few years ago. If you want to know about practicing, he said to me, I always tell composers, don't send me anything until you're finished. Whatever it is, I don't want to have to practice it again. So when you've got the final version, send it to me and I'll work on it. And I'm not going to name the composer, but he'd sent in this piece and he said, you know what, that guy, he changed it and he said he changed 2 measures. Imagine that. 1 week of my life gone. Think about that next time you think you've done enough practice. 2 measures got changed. 1 week of my life gone. I've never practiced like that. Okay, my strategy for learning a new piece of music. You know, it's not even good enough to be good at playing the piano. It's very difficult to sit down at the piano and hear a new piece of music through, because a lot of it is quite, a lot of effects or quarter tones or whatever. I think what's got me better at this over the years is because I do more conducting now, is I spend a lot of time reading scores and learning to hear what I see on the page. So I have to say, the new and wonderful piece by Matthew Ricketts that we did in the summer, I kind of had a pretty good idea from playing the odd chord on the piano or from reading the score. I had a pretty good idea of what it was going to sound like. Certainly the nature, the style of the piece. It was very ethereal, it was very beautiful, it was very melodic, and you could see the structure. So the first thing you need to do when you get a new piece of music is to do a basic structural analysis of the piece. And I'm not talking about according to your theory teacher at college or university. They live on a different planet. I'm talking about roughly, this section leads into this one, this is blah, blah, blah. Just a basic, how it all goes together. What the themes are, sometimes they're actually themes, they sometimes go back to doing boring things like that. So it's having an idea of the basic structure of the piece. Now, here's the important thing. You don't really know how it's going to sound. You don't really know how it's going to work. So you can't draw any strong conclusions before. You can have a rough idea, but until the downbeat comes down on the first rehearsal, you don't really know how it's going to work, unless you've got unless you've got a brain like Pierre Boulez had, and not many of us have that. I certainly don't. So stay flexible. The first rehearsals, you got to think really fast. You've got to get the notes in place. You've got to really have a rough idea of the structure of the piece, and you've got to have the framework of the piece technically in your head. And then you've got to react incredibly quickly. You've to form the real idea of the piece. So I think the mistake that one can make is to have fixed ideas as to exactly what the piece is and how it's going to be before you reach the first rehearsal. You talk to the conductor, you talk to the composer, but you're the one who actually has to deliver it, so you have to think really, really fast on your feet. Open mind is the key to everything in life, of course, but be open, to be flexible, to change, and get all of the basic structure, musically and technically, of the piece clear in your head before rehearsal 1. The rest of it is going to have to come together really quickly. Okay, here we have a very fascinating question from Anthony Kershaw, and he would like me to talk about adapting to a new orchestra and city. So, moving from the LSO to the Vienna Philharmonic, London to Vienna. And he says, sure, we'd like to hear the whole story, warts and all, but he's sure that the expurgated version would be absolutely fascinating. Well, you can have it warts and all, it wasn't such a, there's a lot of Codswallop talked about orchestras, and particularly the Vienna Philharmonic. You know, it's and a lot of it really is, yeah, it is just nonsense. The biggest problem, you know, when you move, it's not the orchestra, it's adapting to life. No matter how open-minded we are, and how open to change we are, and how excited we are about changing our life. You know, that different food, and the different tasting water, and the wonderful coffees, and different, you know, different climate that we love so much when we go on holiday. After a while of living in a new environment, it just becomes different, and you really notice, you know, how strange it is, because we grow up with bread tasting a certain way, cheese tasting another way, and, you know, you pay bills this way, and your bank works that way, and you park your car this way, and, you know, and it's different. And it really turns you upside down. And I've seen a lot of people, I saw a lot of people in the Vienna Philharmonic lose their identity, lose the substance of who they were as people. And it wasn't really the orchestra's fault. It was the fact that it was so bloody different to anything they'd ever known in their life. No good, no bad, just really different. And there's this, there's a great sign in Vienna that says, Wien ist anders. Vienna is different. And it really is different. But it may interest you to know that I personally have found it a bigger change moving from Austria to Switzerland than I did moving from London to Vienna. When I talk to Austrians on the phone now, I want to meet with them, I find out myself thinking, oh, it's so lovely to be speaking English. Hang on, I'm speaking German. But because I learned Viennese, it feels like a home language to me. You know, so that's the biggest problem. You get letters from the authorities that you don't understand, and it adds to this massive stress to your life. And of course, most of us are very fortunate to have people holding your hand, but, you know, learning the language, getting used to different things. All in all, no, not all in all. The change that I made in my life, in my job, in my country when I moved from London to Vienna was probably the best thing I ever did in my life. Personally and professionally and musically. The Vienna Philharmonic, whatever anyone might say, is a very fine institution. It's a wonderful, wonderful set of people. I have some bad things to say about them. Everybody has bad things to say about their environment, but it's a tiny proportion of all of the wonderful things. So, musically, the difference between the London Symphony and the Vienna Philharmonic, I couldn't believe the commitment of the Vienna Philharmonic. I could not believe. And those of you who know the London Symphony Orchestra will, you know, don't raise an eyebrow here, because, I mean, you might say, well, the London Symphony is very... Yes, it is. The London Symphony is a very fine orchestra, and it's incredibly committed, and it's incredibly professional. It's a lovely environment, you know. It certainly was when I was there. I laughed until I cried every day, let me tell you. And some of the concerts are just this going for it was just incredible. It went up a large step when I went to Vienna. And I've hinted at that in my podcast about back desk viola players in Vienna. So the commitment to their product, to who they were, was incredible. So the pressure level And the expectation level actually did go up when I went to Vienna. But it was kind of created in-house because they expected so much of themselves and of each other, despite being very, very forgiving. The Vienna Philharmonic is like a family. You don't leave a family. You fight within the family, but you don't leave. And that was a strange philosophy for me to get around. As far as the practicalities of playing were concerned, I felt welcome from day one. I have to say, in Vienna, I never felt anybody sort of like saying, what the heck's this guy doing here? It was always like, wow, he's good, isn't he? And I felt very loved, and I felt, as I did in London, I must have got something right, because when I look back on it, and my former colleagues speak very fondly of me, I know. So I obviously didn't get everything wrong. In Vienna, it was, you know, as long as you play well and play the way they play, they don't really care. And I, from day one, wanted to fit in. I think that's the crucial thing. I know a lot of people who try to make the jump from one culture and one orchestra to another one. And they go in and try and do, I know some American players who've done this, where they've been born, raised and trained in the US and have come to Europe and gone to an orchestra and basically said, well, what you're doing is wrong. We should be doing this because that's what we do. Now, it's not rocket science. You don't need me to tell you that's not going to work, and it doesn't. I mean, I could very well have gone into the Vienna Philharmonic and said, look, the London Symphony Orchestra right now is probably, arguably, the best brass section in the world, which it was. And certainly at the time, and the Vienna Philharmonic was not famed, despite having had some unbelievable players, brass players, Roland Berger, you know, Hans Gansch, I mean, monsters. Despite having, you know, some brilliant players in the orchestra, it was not famed for the level of the brass playing. There were also, it's widely known, a few issues that needed to be dealt with. Nevertheless, I went in there and said, you know, I want to do what you do. I want to play the way you play. Because remember, there are two things. There's style, tradition, and there's quality. Now, we can always improve the quality, but we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and throw the style, the tradition. I mean, there's a heritage of playing there that goes back to Richard Strauss, back to Wagner, back to Verdi. You know, these people all, you know, and conductors too, Furtwängler, you know, Knappersbusch. It's, you know, and that I certainly felt the depth of tradition and history there when I went there. And it was like, well, how can I adapt my playing to fit in with your traditions? And whilst doing so, is there anything that I can do that might rub off on what we do as a trombone section? Let's start there, you know, never mind the whole brass section. But is there anything we can do in the trombones that I can bring that's going to make this section sound better within the style? So I actually never had any issues. You know, it's like there was this, what was it? It was a ridiculous beer for, was it Carlsberg years ago? Was it, he who drinks Danish is Danish? You know, it's like, and it's in Vienna, it's like those, you know, I went there, I drank Austrian wines, love them, ate Austrian food, learnt the language, and there's a warts and all, because if you listen to my German, it's extremely Viennese. I went into the history of recordings of the orchestra, and I sat down and I asked all of my colleagues, how should I play this? And amusingly, a lot of the answers were very different. And they said, no, don't listen to him. He doesn't know. He thinks he understands the style, but he doesn't. No. This is what you're supposed to do. So that was quite amusing. And another thing that you might be surprised about with the Vienna Philharmonic, when I went there, Vienna was a village. And they had no outside perspective. Those people were working in the opera all day, every day, the whole of their bloody lives, until they retired. They didn't have time to go and listen to other concerts. If they had free time, they were playing chamber music. And they didn't do life by comparison. They didn't compare themselves to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra or the London Symphony, because they were too busy getting on with their lives and their jobs. And they were actually a little bit, I have to say, they didn't think they were very good. The Vienna Philharmonic, you want to put that in writing as a quote? When I joined the Vienna Philharmonic, they were a little bit scared that they weren't very good because they were aware of their weaknesses. But as with most people, they can see what they can't do, but they can't see what they can do. I mean, they had so many wonderful strengths. Oh, I mean, come on, you've heard them. They're incredible. So I actually didn't have any problems fitting in. Long term, I'm not Austrian. I'm not Viennese. For my sins, I'm from Yorkshire. And I'm not a proud Yorkshireman. But there's part of me that will forever be York man, the northern man, And so you can never totally, if you want to use the word integrate, I mean, you can learn to fit in. I'm incredibly grateful to Austria and to the Vienna Philharmonic for what they did for me. I will be eternally grateful to that country, which is, I guess, if I'm going to go at all politically motivated in this, I am also grateful, although I find it harder to integrate in Switzerland. I am still incredibly grateful to Switzerland and the Swiss people for the life that they have, to use a very apt word, afforded me. And so I'm incredibly grateful to Vienna too. I don't know whether this is the kind of answer that you expected. If anyone's asking, for me to dish out any dirt on the Vienna Philharmonic, I could also do that with the London Symphony, as you could with any environment you've ever worked in. Nobody's whiter than white. There are problems everywhere. Walk out onto the street. If you interview any 100 people on the street, you'll probably find some less than savory attitudes. And that demographic plays out in every social environment, working environment, I'm sure it does. And given that, I think the Vienna Philharmonic was pretty on the money, I must say, when I was there. And I believe they're quite different now. I have students in the orchestra now, and obviously still a lot of friends, but I don't work there anymore. Maybe that's something I need to fix at some point. Now, let me just go back over this. I think it comes down to, let's leave Vienna out of this. If I were to go to who knows, let's say the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, not that I'm suggesting that, because Jay Friedman is probably going to be there for another 38 years. And I'm kind of done with... That wouldn't be cool. I'm 55, Wouldn't that be cool if I went to Chicago and they brought me in as the younger man, 55 years old. But let's say I was to go to Chicago, the first thing that I would do would be to work out how I could serve the institution musically, to look back over the history. I would do the same thing in Chicago as I did in Vienna, Who are you? What do you do? What do you need from me? How can I contribute to this environment? once you've got your feet under the table, you know, you can then try and not change things back to what you did in London or in Vienna, but you can think, okay, we need to go in this direction. How can I do that from within, you know? And here's another bit of politics thrown in there for you, you know, and you can work out anything you want with the Brexit conversation at the moment, but I'm one of those people who believes in change from within. I'm one of those people that can see the need for change, but also believe in change from within. So there you go. So I would do that. Any of you listening to this, if you're going to make a move in your life, don't walk in. This thing about the new broom sweeping clean just sounds absurd to me. You go in, you look around, you see, you know, what is the environment here? What's the landscape? How can I fit in? First of all, fit in. Secondly, how can I help? So, I don't know. Anthony, get back to you if you want to know more specific things than that, but that would be my answer to that question. Okay, so I have a couple of fantastic questions from Marlena, my student, who just said, I've just started a job in an orchestra playing as first trombone, and she's got a couple of questions. One is relating to sitting and waiting forever in an orchestra concert before you come in on an exposed entry and how you cope with that. Well, Marlena, well, everybody else, it's something that blights everybody, that causes problems for everybody who's sitting in an orchestra. As Ron Barron once said, you win a job by playing high, fast and loud, and you keep it by playing, you know, mid-register and quiet. And it's very appropriate. We've all been through the Brahms 1 scenario where you sit there for getting on for 40 minutes, 35 minutes, and then you come in on one of the greatest moments in all of music. And Brahms 1 is just one example of that kind of thing. And I actually can discuss it now without twitching. Which is nice. I think I played Brahms 1 about 50 times. I never missed it. I think I clipped it once in a rehearsal. So I think once. I never missed it in a concert. But you know, I always thought I was going to. And no matter how many times I played it and how well it went, I never thought it's going to be all right this time. Maybe that's why I never missed it. Maybe it was that keeping myself on my toes and being aware of the danger that had protected me. Now, a lot of teachers, in my opinion, don't spend enough time preparing students for life in the big, wild, dangerous world of orchestras. You know, they seem to be too keen on preparing people to win auditions. And Marlena, if you've asked this question, maybe I'm one of them. It comes down to the solidity of your basic technique. I was reminded a couple of days ago by a good friend of mine, Kenny Crookson, head of Brass Bands England. He reminded me, he's a bit of a snooker fan, of the great Steve Davis doing a snooker masterclass. And people wrote in to him and said, you know, I'm having trouble playing this shot on a snooker table. What do you think I should do? And he says, well, what I do is I put the white ball on the balk end of the table, and I try and hit it down the length of the table so it bounces at the far end and comes back and stops in exactly the same place that I hit it. Which, as you could imagine, takes incredible skill, because you've got to get the weight right of the hit, and you've got to hit the ball right in the middle. Otherwise, you know, it's not going to come back in the same place. And every question But it was a very bad masterclass because every question, he gave the same answer to everything. Well, for that short, I used this exercise, and it was the same exercise every time. So the more solid your basic technique is, the easier it is to do this kind of thing. So when you pick up the trombone, and this, by the way, Marlena and everybody out there, this is something that I have to work with people on very much and they get a bit grumpy with their teacher when they've left. It's like, you never told me about this. And in many cases, because the teacher's never gone through it themselves. Or they don't consider it that important. It is vitally important. It's how we earn our money. The better we are at playing one note, the more money we earn. That sounds like a title for another podcast, doesn't it? So the muscle memory of how you pick the trombone up, where the mouthpiece goes on your face, what the shape of your embouchure is, how you breathe and how you articulate for every single note on the trombone is of crucial importance. Now, I know that's probably going against what you might think is my teaching philosophy, which is we imagine and it happens. It doesn't. I'd like to imagine running the 100 meters in under 10 seconds, but I can't. And no matter how much I think about it, it's not going to happen. Sometimes we do need to do some what I call reverse engineering to work out what I call how I do this. And as young players starting in orchestras, the problem for you is to work out what you do and not what your teacher has told you to do. They're two different things sometimes. And not sometimes, almost always. The actual fine-tuning of how I do something will be different to how your teacher does it. And let's not forget, a lot of teachers just tell you what they do. And so it's called reverse engineering. You know how to play a top A natural. Come on, we all do. Sometimes you have to identify, I breathe like this. I release like this. My timing is like this. And so it's then just repeating that hundreds and hundreds of times. I was also, Kenny Cookson reminded me of Colin Montgomery, the famous golfer, who at the end of every day's practice would do 200 putts, short shots from 2 feet. 200. And if he missed number 199, he started again at 0. And that's a skill that we need also to do as orchestral players. Marlena, if you haven't heard me say this already, I'm surprised. But if I played Brahms 1, I had literally played hundreds of top A naturals in the couple of weeks before. If I was playing Bolero, I'd played hundreds of top B flats, and not one after another, with a gap, understanding I breathe, like this. And as I like to say, on the trombone in the orchestra, art begins after the successful articulation of the first note. I know a lot of people who say, I just think of the fantasy. Yeah, I know, they tend to miss Brahms 1 a few times as well. I would never allow myself to do that. So it's muscle memory and it's understanding your system. Now, they then, on top of that, leaves the big, what we call the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the conductor. Because when you play A naturals at home, it's when you want to do it or when your metronome wants to do it, in the way that you want to do it, at the dynamic that you want to do it. Now, you know where I'm going with this. As soon as you get into an orchestra, you don't have control over any of those things. You've got someone conducting. A lot of them are string players. And you know how they do that? Have you seen them, where they sort of gently drop their hands to create an effect? And all the string players, they all put the bow on the string And they sit and they wait and they say, no, after you, no, please, no, after you. And then eventually they slowly start to draw the bow across the string, and this wonderful warm glow starts to come across the string section, which is for us an absolute bloody disaster. We can't do that. So this is where the music does come into it. This is where, and I'm going to use my most hated word again, we have to interpret the intentions and the wishes musically of the conductor. Let's not forget, these people are brilliant. These people are brilliant musicians. And when they drop their arms wanting a certain effect, no, I'm sorry, I was never one of those who said, well, when it comes back up and at the third button on their shirt you play. That's nonsense. And I was never one of those that said, you know, I just don't look, I breathe and play. It works against music. In many, you know, I've spent a lot of my life wishing I could do that, but I can't. Because if something is being created, I can't just turn off. So I have to adapt my system to the musicality that the conductor wants and intends. And then there's the third thing on top of that, which is you then have to bring a section with you. So your body language has to be such that a section can understand. And I'm going to go into that in a video podcast with a section. And so what this comes back to, Marlene and everybody, is 100% solid with your basic technique is not enough. It has to withstand anything. It has to withstand your nerves. It has to withstand someone pushing you just as you're about to play a note, which is basically musically what a conductor will do to you. It has to be able to withstand all of those things. So again, go back to the basic technique and make it more and more and more solid. I realize so much I just practiced this morning. And I wish you could see inside my practice studio. Actually not, because it's a bloody mess, but you know, I wish you could see what happens in there. And I just practice. My philosophy is simple, 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 very difficult. There's nothing in between. Get the simple things right and the difficult things will look after themselves. So make your basic breathing and articulation system as solid, as perfect as you can. Now, the issues on that are on an individual basis. So I can't tell you what work needs doing on all of your basic technique, Marlene. I can with you if you like. You're going to come to Bern soon, aren't you? So we can talk it through. And you know, these teething problems do crop up when you start a new job. Marlene, you're not doing anything wrong. It's happened to all of us. We all have to adjust when we first start working in an orchestra. Marlene, your second question, what is the role of each member of a section? Is a fantastic question, and it's something that we worked on a lot in Switzerland, and I am going to do a video podcast on that at some point. It'll link into the one that I've just spoken about. So I hope that kind of somehow answers questions. And this is Marlene's question part 2, kind of, because Marlene was asking, in these pieces like Brahms 1, or where you have to sit around for a long time, what do you do with your mind? How do you keep your concentration so that you're not asleep when it comes to starting? Although there are quite a lot of famous trombone players who have fallen asleep in concerts and have had to have been woken up to play Bolero, for example. He's right, wasn't it, Dudley? You did fall asleep in that one, I think it was. I've always been too twitchy to fall asleep in something like that. So, well, that is really an interesting question, Marlene. Perhaps even more interesting than you realise, because the question is, do we stay concentrating for the whole of the 35, 40 minutes, in some cases an hour? Or do we switch off and think about football or how to make a chocolate gâteau? I've tried all of those, And honestly, none of them make it any easier when it comes to actually playing it. There is a danger that you can become numbed. You can become desensitized to the situation, and you're not really fully mentally alert when it comes to playing those nasty entries. There's a point where relaxed gets taken a little bit too far. What I finished up doing, Marlena, was I followed the line of the music. I really put my attention on what was happening in the concert. So as a listener, following the structure of the first movement of Brahms 1 and seeing the way the whole thing grows. And I actually, that really, the sound of doom at the beginning of the last movement of Brahms 1, for example. I keep talking about Brahms 1 because it's the best example that we all know. And then it'd be like, okay, here we go. Now it's time. And then it's like, okay, sit up, start to breathe, right, here we go. So in many ways, enjoying the music for the first 3 movements kept me on the one hand alert, but on the other hand, kept my mind off what I was just about to do. Because if you're sitting there for 35 minutes thinking, oh, here he comes, it'll be here soon, oh no, what's going to happen? Then that's also not good because you get yourself all worked up before you even get to it. So people have different ways psychologically of dealing with it. That was the one that worked for me. Put yourself into the music. If other people can just switch off, I think when I was a kid, before you start realizing what life's all about, I just sit there and think about Leeds United Football Club or fish and chips or who knows, and then just sort of, A natural. Okay, here you go. Here's an A natural, and do that. And as time goes on, and you realise the implications of that A natural and how important it is. I think also if you put your mind into the music, it helps you contextualise what you're about to play. What you're about to play it should be a follow-on from everything that's going on before. So it helps you musically if you really focus on the music that's going by, really immerse yourself in it. And then what you have to play is a logical follow-on from the whole concert. Hope that helps. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.